Captain HFY stared at the red warning symbol on her screen. The bright crimson mark covered the entire Sol system like a disease. Every star chart in the galaxy showed the same thing. Dead zone. Entry forbidden. No exceptions. She had been studying dead worlds for months now. The Galactic Council wanted to find planets they could bring back to life. Most dead worlds were boring. Old planets where the sun had died. Frozen rocks where the air had leaked away into space. But Sol 3 was different. The energy readings made no sense. Dead worlds should be cold and dark. This planet glowed with power. Radio waves leaked from its surface like water from a broken pipe. The readings showed cities and movement and life, but the records said everyone on Sol 3 had died 300 years ago. A terrible plague had killed everything. The planet was poisoned and dangerous. The Council had put warning satellites around the whole system to keep ships away. HFY had read the old reports many times. The language was formal and cold. Complete biological collapse. Total ecosystem failure. Immediate quarantine required for galactic safety. But something felt wrong about the words. They sounded like someone trying too hard to make others afraid. She turned to look at her crew. They were not the best soldiers or scientists in the fleet. Kree was a mechanic who had been caught stealing parts. Vorth was a communications officer who asked too many questions about classified missions. Nell was a pilot who had crashed 3 ships in training. They were the kind of crew that got sent to study dead planets because no one expected them to find anything important. But HFY liked them. They were curious. They wanted to know why things worked the way they did. And right. Now they all wanted to know why the energy readings from Sol 3 looked like a living world. "Captain," Kree said from his station, "I have been looking at the power signatures from that planet. They match the patterns we see from Class 7 civilizations." "That is impossible," Vorth said. "Class 7 means millions of people. Cities. Everywhere. Space travel. The records say nothing lives there." "Maybe the records are wrong," Nell said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. In the Galactic Council, records were never wrong. The Council had been keeping track of every world for thousands of years. Their computers knew everything about every planet that had ever been discovered. "Records are not wrong," HFY said, slowly. "But sometimes they do not tell the whole truth." She pulled up the original quarantine order on her screen. The document was old and hard to read. Most of it was in formal council language that said very little. But one line caught her. "Attention. For the protection of galactic civilization and the preservation of universal peace." Strange words for a plague quarantine. Usually the warnings talked about disease and contamination. This sounded like they were afraid of something else. "Captain," Vorth said, "I am picking up radio signals from the Sol system." "That is impossible. Dead worlds do not broadcast." "I know. But listen to this." A sound filled the bridge. It was music, not the formal tones that most galactic species used for communication. This was wild and complex and beautiful. Voices sang in harmony over instruments that created sounds HFY had never heard before. "How old is this signal?" she asked. "It is happening right now. Live transmission from Sol 3. The crew sat in silence. A dead world did not make music. A poisoned planet did not have people singing and playing instruments. Someone had lied to them. "There is more," Vorth continued. "I am detecting thousands of different broadcast sources. News programs, entertainment, educational content, private communications. This world has a complete planetary communication network." HFY felt her heart racing. In all her years as a ship captain, she had never found anything like this. A living world that the galaxy thought was dead. A civilization that had been hidden for 3 centuries. "Captain," Kree said. "What do we do?" She knew what they were supposed to do. Follow orders, stay away from the quarantine zone, file a report that said they had found nothing unusual, go back to cataloging truly dead worlds. But she also knew what she wanted to do. Find out the truth. learn why the Council had hidden an entire civilization from the galaxy, discover what was so dangerous about Sol 3 that it had to be marked as a dead zone. Plot a course for the Sol system, she said. Captain, that is a direct violation of Council orders, Vorth warned. I know. We could be court-martialed, imprisoned. Our families could lose their citizenship. I know. The automatic defense systems around that system will fire on any ship. That gets too close. I know. She turned to face her crew. These misfits and outcasts who had been assigned to her because no one else wanted them. They were looking at her with fear and excitement and hope. But we are scientists, she said. Our job is to find the truth. And right now, the truth is broadcasting music from a world that is supposed to be dead. Nell began entering coordinates into the navigation system. It will take us 6 days to reach the Sol system boundary. Good. That gives us time to study the signals and prepare for what we might find. As the ship turned toward the forbidden system, Zexhai wondered what they would discover. The Council had many secrets. Some were kept to protect people from dangerous knowledge. Others were kept to protect the Council from people who might ask dangerous questions. But she had never found a secret this big before. An entire world hidden from the galaxy. A civilization that had been erased from official history. People who were supposed to be dead, but were very much alive. The music from Sol 3 continued to play over the ship's speakers. It was strange and alien, but somehow familiar. Like something she had heard in dreams. The voices sang about love and loss and hope and dreams. Universal feelings that every intelligent species understood. Captain, Vorth said, I am detecting more signals. These appear to be news broadcasts. Can you understand them? The translation computer is working on it, but I am picking up words that suggest conflict. War. Fighting. Fighting who? I do not know. The signals are too complex to translate quickly. Zexhai nodded. Most galactic civilizations were peaceful. The Council made sure of that. Species that fought too much were not allowed to join galactic society. They were isolated until they learned to behave properly. Maybe that was what had happened to Sol 3. Maybe they had been quarantined not because of plague, but because they were too violent, too dangerous, too unwilling to follow Council rules. But if that was true, why lie about it? Why not simply list them as a restricted military threat? The Council had done that with dozens of other species. 6 days to answers, she said to herself. The ship continued toward the forbidden system. Behind them, the normal galaxy went about its business. Millions of worlds following Council law. Billions of people who never questioned what they were told. Ahead of them lay the unknown. A world that sang in the darkness. A civilization that had been hidden from the stars. And maybe, just maybe, the most important discovery in galactic history. The red warning symbol still glowed on her screen. Dead zone. Entry forbidden. But Captain Zexhai had never been very good at following rules. The warning satellites appeared on their screens like angry red eyes, ancient machines left by the Council to guard the forbidden system. They had been floating in space for 3 centuries, sending the same message over and over. Warning, Sol. System quarantined. Biological hazard. Turn back immediately. But Captain Zexhai had studied these satellites during the long journey. They were old models. Their sensors could see ships but could not identify what kind of ships they were, and they had one major weakness. They only watched for ships coming directly toward the system. Take us around the backside of that gas giant, she told Nell. The pilot nodded and changed course. Their ship disappeared behind the massive planet. The satellites lost track of them immediately. Now we go in quiet, Zexhai said. All power to minimum. No active scans, no communications. They drifted through. Space like a piece of space junk, slowly moving deeper into the forbidden system. past planets that should have been dead but showed clear signs of mining and construction, past moons that had structures built on their surfaces, and then they saw Sol 3. By the ancient stars, Cree whispered. The planet was beautiful. Blue oceans, reflected sunlight like mirrors. White clouds swirled in perfect spirals. Green and brown land masses were clearly visible. But most amazing of all were the lights. Even on the day side of the planet, they could see the glow of cities. Massive urban areas that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Transportation networks that formed glowing webs across entire continents. And in orbit around the planet, hundreds of artificial structures, space stations, communication satellites, what looked like construction platforms building even larger structures. This was not a dead world. This was a thriving civilization at the peak of its development. "Vorth, are you getting this recorded?" Zexhai asked. "Yes, Captain. But I am also detecting something else. We are being scanned." "By who?" "Unknown. Monsieur, scan is very sophisticated, much more advanced than our own sensors." Zexhai felt her heart jump. If the humans had detected them, their secret approach had failed. But nothing happened. No weapons fired at them. No warnings were broadcast. The scans continued for a few minutes and then stopped. "They know we are here," Nell said. "Yes, but they are not attacking. Maybe they want to see what we do next." What do we do next? That was a good question. Zexhai had planned to observe, from a distance and gather information. But now that the humans knew they were there, everything had changed. Continue passive observation, she decided. Record everything. If they want to talk to us, they will make contact. For the next several hours, they watched and listened. The radio traffic from Sol 3 was incredible. Thousands of different channels broadcasting news, entertainment, education, and private communications. The translation computer worked overtime trying to make sense of it all. Slowly, a picture began to form of the civilization below. The humans called their world Earth. They had a single government that represented all. The different nations and cultures on the planet, their population was in the billions. They had spread to other planets in their system and were building colonies on moons and asteroids. But most interesting of all, they had been trying to contact other intelligent species for decades. "Captain, listen to this," Vorth said. He played a translated broadcast from what appeared to be a news program. Today marks the 50th anniversary of the Deep Space Communication Project. For 5 decades, Earth has been sending messages to the stars, hoping to make contact with other intelligent life. Despite our best efforts and most powerful transmitters, we have received no response. Some scientists believe we may be alone in the universe. Others think that alien civilizations may be too far away to detect our signals. Zexhai felt sick. For 50 years, the humans had been calling out to the galaxy, and the galaxy had been ordered to ignore them. The Council had received their messages, but had chosen to pretend Sol 3 was dead. "There is more," Vorth continued. Another broadcast began. The Space Defense Force announced today that long-range sensors have detected what appears to be artificial objects at the edge of our solar system. Military officials believe these may be automated probes from an unknown civilization. However, all attempts to communicate with these objects have failed. The satellites. The humans had found the quarantine satellites and tried to talk to them. But the machines had been programmed to ignore all communication attempts. "They know something is out there," Cree said. "They know they are not alone." But they do not know about the galaxy, Zexhai realized. They do not know about the Council or the thousands of civilizations that surround them. They think they are isolated in empty space. She began to understand how cruel the quarantine really was. The humans were intelligent and curious. They wanted to explore and learn and meet other species. But they had been trapped in their own system for 3 centuries, not knowing that a vast galactic community existed just beyond their reach. "Captain," Nell said urgently, "we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" Long-range sensors show ships approaching the system. Big ships, council fleet markers. Zexhai checked her displays. A full battle group was heading towards Sol at maximum. Speed! 12 heavy cruisers and a command dreadnought. Enough firepower to destroy anything in the system. How long until they arrive? 18 hours. Why are they coming now? I think they detected our presence when we crossed the quarantine boundary, Vorth said. The satellites may have sent an automatic alert. She realized their secret mission had just become a disaster. The Council fleet would arrive expecting to find an empty system with a single unauthorized ship. Instead, they would find a thriving human civilization that clearly knew something was happening. What are your orders, Captain? Kree asked. Zexhai looked at the beautiful planet below. Billions of people who had no idea that a military fleet was approaching with orders to enforce the quarantine. People who had spent decades trying to make friends with the galaxy, only to be ignored and isolated. We have to warn them. Captain, that is a direct violation of first contact protocols. The protocols assume we are dealing with a primitive species that needs protection. These humans have space travel and advanced technology. They deserve to know what is coming. The Council will execute us for unauthorized contact. The Council has been lying about this entire system for 3 centuries. Maybe it is time someone told the truth. She turned to Vorth. Open a communication channel to SOL-3, all frequencies. Full translation matrix. Are you sure about this, Captain? No. But I am sure that leaving them defenseless against a battle fleet is wrong. The communication array came to life. For the first time in 300 years, someone from the galaxy was about to speak directly to the humans of Earth. This is Captain Zexhai of the Galactic survey vessel Wanderer's Dream. We are representatives of the Galactic Council. We need to speak with your leaders immediately. You are in great danger. The response was immediate. Every communication channel on the planet went silent. Then, after a few minutes, a single voice replied, "This is Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of Xenobiological Research, speaking for the Earth Defense Council. We have been waiting for this call for a very long time." The voice was calm but excited, and underneath the excitement, Zexhai heard something else. Suspicion. The humans were happy to finally make contact, but they were also wondering why it had taken so long. Dr. Chen, I need to explain the situation quickly. A Council military fleet will arrive in your system in 18 hours. They believe your world is uninhabited. Why would they think that? Zexhai took a deep breath. Because your planet has been classified as a dead zone for the past 300 years. The official records say a plague killed everyone here. There was a long silence. When Dr. Chen spoke again, her voice had changed completely. Are you telling me that your people have known we existed for 3 centuries and chose to ignore us? Yes. And now a military fleet is coming to our system? Yes. Another. Silence. Longer this time. Dr. Chen, I am here. I am just processing the fact that we have been quarantined like diseased animals. The anger in her voice was clear even through the translation, and Zexhai could not blame her. The humans had every right to be furious. Dr. Chen, the fleet will arrive soon. You need to prepare your people. Oh, we will prepare. We have been preparing for decades. Ever since we found those satellites, we knew someone was watching us. We just did not know who or why. What do you mean, preparing? Captain Zexhai, you may want to update your files on human civilization. We have changed quite a bit in the last 300 years. Dr. Sarah Chen appeared on the main screen of their ship. She was a small woman with dark hair and intelligent eyes. Behind her, Zexhai could see a massive command center filled with humans working at complex computer stations. Everything looked clean and efficient and very advanced. Captain Zexhai, I want to thank you for warning us about the incoming fleet, Dr. Chen said. But before we discuss our response, I have some questions. Of course. I will tell you whatever I can. 300 years ago, what happened to make your council decide we were dead? Zexhai pulled up the historical files on her computer. According to our records, A plague swept through your population in the year 2157. Total biological collapse occurred within 6 months. All life on the planet was declared extinct. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. 2157. That is an interesting year to choose. What happened in 2157? That was the year the colony ship New Horizon launched from Earth, our first attempt to establish a permanent settlement outside this solar system. HFY felt confused. A colony ship? But the records say your entire population died. Our population grew by 8 billion people between 2157 and today. We are very much alive, Captain. The question is why your council wanted the galaxy to think otherwise. She gestured to someone off-screen. A moment later, another human appeared. He was older and wore a military uniform covered with medals and rank insignia. This is Admiral Marcus Webb, head of the Earth Defense Force. Admiral, please tell our new friend about the New Horizon. The Admiral stepped forward. His face was hard and serious. The New Horizon launched with 12,000 colonists and crew. Their mission was to establish our first interstellar colony. 6 months after launch, we received their final transmission. What did it say? HFY asked. Quote, "We have made contact with representatives of a galactic government. They are demanding our surrender and submission to their authority. They want to place Earth under something called a protectorate agreement. We have refused. They are moving to intercept us. If you do not hear from us again, assume we are dead. Prepare Earth for contact. Do not trust them." End quote. HFY stared at the screen. That is not in our records. I am sure it is not, Dr. Chen said coldly. Tell me, Captain, what is a protectorate agreement? HFY knew she should not answer. Protectorate agreements were classified council policy. But looking at the anger in the humans' faces, she realized they deserve to know the truth. When the council discovers a new intelligent species, they offer protection and guidance. In exchange, the new species agrees to follow council law and provide resources and labor as requested. Slavery, Admiral Webb said bluntly. No, it is a partnership, where one partner has all the power and the other has no choice, Dr. Chen finished. Yes, that sounds like slavery to me. HFY felt uncomfortable. She had never thought of protectorate agreements that way before. The council always said they were helping primitive species develop safely. But when she imagined someone forcing her people into such an arrangement, it did sound wrong. What happened to the New Horizon? She asked. Admiral Webb's expression became even harder. We never found out for certain. But 3 months after their final transmission, we detected a massive energy explosion approximately where their ship should have been. No debris, no survivors, no explanation. And then the satellites appeared, Dr. Chen added. Machines that broadcast warnings about biological contamination and death. Machines that jammed our communications whenever we tried to send messages to other stars. The pieces were falling into place. The New Horizon had encountered a council fleet. They had refused to submit to a protectorate agreement. There had been a fight. The humans had lost. And the council had decided to hide the whole incident by declaring Earth a dead zone. You were not quarantined because of plague, HFY said quietly. You were quarantined because you said no. That is what we figured out, Dr. Chen confirmed. Your council does not like species that refuse to kneel. But that was 300 years ago. Why maintain the quarantine for so long? Admiral Webb smiled grimly, because they were afraid of what we might become if left alone. Before HFY could ask what he meant, alarms began sounding throughout the human command center. Technicians called out reports in rapid succession. Admiral, long-range sensors show 13 ships dropping out of hyperspace at the system boundary. Configuration matches Galactic Council battle group formation. Lead ship is broadcasting on emergency channels. Put it through, Admiral Webb ordered. A new voice filled the communication channel. It spoke with the authority of absolute power. This is Fleet Commander Vorthak of the Galactic Council Navy. Unknown vessel in the Sol system, you are in violation of quarantine protocols. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Dr. Chen looked at Zexhai. That would be your friends. They are not exactly friends right now, Zexhai admitted. Admiral Webb stepped closer to the screen. Captain Zexhai, I want you to understand something very important. For 3 centuries, we have known that someone was watching us. Someone who considered us a threat. Someone who wanted us isolated and contained. Yes. Do you know what humans do when they are threatened? No. We prepare for war. The screen changed to show a tactical display of the Sol system. Zexhai gasped. The display showed hundreds of ships moving throughout the system, not the primitive vessels she had expected, but sleek warships that looked more advanced than anything in the Council fleet. Those are all human ships? Just the ones we want you to see, Dr. Chen said. We have been building our military for 3 centuries, Captain. We knew someone would come eventually. We wanted to be ready. Admiral Webb activated another display. This one showed the Council fleet approaching through space. 13 ships against our entire civilization. They really do not understand what they are dealing with. Admiral, please, Zexhai said urgently. The Council fleet has orders to maintain the quarantine. If you reveal your military strength, they will call for reinforcements. This could become a war. Captain, Dr. Chen said softly. This became a war the moment your people decided we were too dangerous to exist. Fleet Commander Vorthak's voice came over the communication channel again. Unknown vessel, you have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal from the quarantine zone. Admiral Webb looked at Dr. Chen. She nodded. Open a channel to the Council fleet, the Admiral ordered. Channel open, sir. Admiral Webb stepped forward and spoke clearly into the transmitter. Fleet Commander Vorthak, this is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Earth Defense Force. You are entering our solar system without permission. We demand that you explain your presence immediately. Silence filled the communication channel. Then Vorthak's voice returned, confused and angry. Impossible. Sol 3 is a dead world. There are no survivors. Commander, I am standing on the surface of Earth speaking to you right now. We have a population of 12 billion people and a space fleet of over 3,000 ships. We are very much alive. Another long silence. This is some kind of trick. Sol 3 was sterilized centuries ago. Dr. Chen took control of the communication system. Commander Vorthak, we are transmitting our complete planetary database to your ships right now. Population records, industrial output, military strength, everything you need to understand that your records are wrong. This is impossible, Vorthak repeated, but his voice now carried a note of fear. Commander, Admiral Webb said, you have exactly 10 minutes to explain why your government has been lying about our existence for 300 years. After that, we will consider your presence in our system an act of war. Zexhai watched her, screens in horror. The situation was spinning out of control. The Council fleet had expected to find an empty system with a single survey ship. Instead, they were facing a major human civilization that knew about the quarantine and was very angry about it. Captain Zexhai, Dr. Chen said, I suggest you move your ship away from our planet immediately. When shooting starts, we would prefer not to hit innocent bystanders. Dr. Chen, please, there has to be another way. There was another way 300 years ago. Your people chose violence then. Now they have to live with the consequences. On her tactical display, Zexhai could see the human ships moving into position around the Council fleet. They moved with precision and coordination that spoke of decades of training and preparation. The humans had not spent 3 centuries in isolation, doing nothing. They had spent 3 centuries getting ready for exactly this moment, and from the look of their ships and the confidence in their voices, they were more than ready. Fleet Commander Vorthak's voice cracked through the communication system. The confident authority was gone. Now he sounded confused and desperate. This is impossible. Our records clearly state that Sol 3 suffered complete biological collapse in 2157. All life forms extinct. Planet declared permanently uninhabitable. Admiral Webb's face appeared on the main screen. Behind him, human technicians worked at their stations with calm efficiency. Commander, your records are lies. We have 12 billion people on this planet and colonies throughout this star system. Prove it, Vorthak demanded. Dr. Chen stepped forward. We are transmitting complete documentation now. Population census data, industrial production reports, military fleet registers, scientific research databases. Everything you need to confirm that we are very much alive. HFY watched the data stream flowing between Earth and the Council fleet. Thousands of files containing proof of human civilization. Birth records showing billions of people. Construction projects spanning decades. Research into advanced technology that rivaled anything the Council possessed. Commander, she said into her communicator, the data appears to be genuine. This is not a primitive civilization. They have technology equal to our own. That is impossible, Vorthak repeated. No species develops that quickly without counsel. Guidance. Admiral Webb laughed bitterly. Commander, we have had 300 years to develop without your guidance, and we have been very busy. Show him the historical files, Dr. Chen ordered someone off screen. New information began flowing to the Council ships, but this time it was not current data about human civilization. It was historical records, documents that had been carefully preserved for 3 centuries. HFY accessed the files and began reading. What she found made her stomach turn. The records showed everything. The New Horizon colony ship launching from Earth in 2157. The first contact with Council ships near the Alpha Centauri system. The negotiations that went wrong when the humans refused to accept protectorate status, and then the battle. The New Horizon had been a colony ship, not a warship, but it carried 12,000 humans who refused to surrender. When the Council fleet moved to capture them, they fought back. They turned their mining equipment into weapons. They used their construction robots as soldiers. They converted their engines into bombs. The fight lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the New Horizon was destroyed, but so were 2 Council heavy cruisers and a command ship. A colony vessel had taken down 3 military warships before being overwhelmed. By the ancient stars, HFY whispered. You see the problem, Dr. Chen said. Your people discovered that humans do not surrender, even when facing impossible odds, even when facing certain death. We fight, but the historical files contained more than just the battle report. They showed what happened next. The Council's response to losing 3 warships to a single colony ship, emergency meetings of the High Council, debates about how to handle a species that refused to submit, arguments about whether to invade Earth or simply destroy it from orbit, and then the decision. Earth would be declared a dead zone. All records of human civilization would be classified. The galaxy would be told that a plague had killed everyone. No one would ever know that humans existed. They were afraid of you, HFY realized. Not afraid of us, Admiral Webb corrected. Afraid of what we represented. A species that would not kneel. A people who preferred death to slavery. But why maintain the lie for 3 centuries? Dr. Chen pulled up another set of files. Because they knew what would happen if they left us alone for that long. The new files showed human development over the past 300 years. Scientific breakthroughs that had taken other species millennia to achieve. Industrial growth that dwarfed entire galactic sectors. Military technology that had evolved far beyond Council standards. You see, Captain, Admiral Webb explained, the Council makes a fundamental mistake about intelligent species. They assume that guidance and protection are necessary for advancement. They believe that without their oversight, primitive species will destroy themselves or stagnate forever. But humans are different, Dr. Chen continued. We thrive under pressure. We grow stronger when challenged. We advance faster when we have to solve problems ourselves. The data streaming from Earth proved their point. In 3 centuries of isolation, humanity had developed fusion power, antimatter engines, gravity manipulation, and weapon systems that could turn entire moons into projectiles. "Commander Vorthak," Admiral Webb called out, "are you reading these files?" "This cannot be accurate," the commander replied. "No species develops this rapidly." "We did, and do you know why?" Silence from the Council fleet. "Because we knew you were coming." Every human child grows up learning about the new horizon. Every human scientist works to develop better technology. Every human soldier trains to defend our world. For 300 years, our entire civilization has been preparing for the day when your council would return. Zexhai accessed more of the human files. What she found was terrifying and impressive at the same time. Humans had built their entire society around the expectation of galactic contact. Not peaceful contact, hostile contact. Every human city had underground shelters that could protect millions of people. Every human factory could be converted to military production within days. Every human ship could be armed and armored for combat. They had not just survived 3 centuries of isolation. They had used that time to become the most militarized civilization Zexhai had ever encountered. "Dr. Chen," she said carefully, "what do you want from the Council now?" "What do we want?" Dr. Chen's eyes flashed with anger. "We want the truth. We want the galaxy to know that we exist. We want an end to the quarantine. And we want an explanation for why our people were murdered 3 centuries ago." "The New Horizon crew was not murdered," Vorthak protested. "They were killed in legitimate military action after refusing lawful council authority." "Lawful authority?" Admiral Webb's voice rose. "What law gave you the right to enslave our colonists?" "The same law that governs all galactic relations. The strong guide the weak. The advanced protect the primitive. Order maintains peace." "And what happens when the weak refuse to be guided? When the primitive refuse to be protected?" Another long silence from the Council fleet. "You eliminate them," Dr. Chen said quietly, "just like you tried to eliminate us." Zexhai realized the full horror of the situation. The Council had not quarantined Earth to protect the galaxy from humans. They had quarantined Earth to hide their attempt at genocide. They had tried to erase an entire species from history because that species would not submit. "Commander Vorthak," she called out, "the humans are right. The Council lied about Sol 3. They lied about the plague. They lied about everything." "Captain Zexhai, you are under arrest for violating quarantine protocols. Return to formation." "Immediately." "No." The word surprised even her, but she realized she meant it. "Captain? No, Commander, I will not help cover up 3 centuries of lies. These people deserve to know the truth. The galaxy deserves to know the truth." "All ships, target the survey vessel," Vorthak ordered. "Prepare to fire." But before the Council ships could lock weapons on Zexhai's vessel, the human fleet moved. Dozens of warships appeared out of nowhere, surrounding the Council battle group. They moved with impossible speed and precision, like they had been waiting in concealment for exactly this moment. "Commander," Admiral Webb's voice was calm, but deadly serious, "I suggest you reconsider your target selection." The tactical displays showed the situation clearly. 13 Council ships surrounded by over 100 human warships. The humans had superior numbers, superior positioning, and technology that the Council had never seen before. "Dr. Chen," Zexhai said quickly, "please do not start a war over my ship." "Captain, this is not about your ship. This is about the fact that your commander just ordered the destruction of a vessel that was trying to help us. That tells us everything we need to know about Council intentions." She turned to address the Council fleet directly. "Commander Vorthak, you came to our system expecting to find a dead world. Instead, you found a thriving civilization. Your response was to threaten violence against anyone who told you the truth. That is exactly the behavior we expected from the people who destroyed the New Horizon. Admiral Webb activated another communication channel. This one broadcast on frequencies that reach throughout the galaxy. "Citizens of the Galactic Council," he began. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Earth Defense Force. For 300 years, your government has lied to you about our existence. They told you we were dead to hide the fact that they murdered our colonists and quarantined our world." "You cannot broadcast that," Vorthak protested. "We just did. And we are transmitting all the historical files to prove our claims. Every species in the galaxy is about to learn what the Council does to people who refuse to surrender their freedom." Zexhai realized that everything had changed. This was no longer just about Earth or the quarantine. This was about the entire structure of galactic civilization. The Council's authority was based on the belief that their guidance was necessary and beneficial. But if other species learned that the Council had been willing to commit genocide to maintain control, the galaxy exploded into chaos. Within hours of Admiral Webb's broadcast, every communication network in galactic civilization was flooded with messages. Species that had been under Council protectorate agreements for centuries suddenly had proof that the Council was willing to murder entire populations to maintain control. Zexhai watched the incoming reports on her ship's communication array. Riots on 17 different worlds. 3 species formally withdrawing from Council authority. Emergency sessions of planetary governments across dozens of star systems. "Captain," Vorth called from his station, "I am receiving priority messages from the Council High Command. They want us to deny everything we have seen." "What are our orders?" Quote, "Report that Sol 3 remains uninhabited. Confirm that all energy readings were caused by automated systems left behind by the plague victims. Make no mention of contact with survivors." End quote. Zexhai looked at the orders and laughed bitterly. Even now, facing the collapse of their authority, the Council wanted to maintain the lie. "Send a reply," she told Vorth. "Tell them that I am a scientist, not a liar. If they want false reports, they can write them themselves." On the main screen, Dr. Chen was coordinating humanity's response to 3 centuries of isolation. The woman, who had seemed calm and professional during first contact, now revealed herself as a master strategist. "Admiral Webb, what is the status of our deep space monitoring stations? All networks are active and recording. We are tracking every ship, movement within 50 light-years of Earth." "Good. How many Council reinforcement fleets are heading our way?" "Long-range sensors show 3 additional battle groups converging on our position. Estimated arrival time is 18 hours. Dr. Chen nodded calmly. "Then we have 18 hours to change the entire structure of galactic civilization." She turned to address both Zexhai and the Council fleet that still surrounded Earth. "Commander Vorthak, I assume you have reported our existence to your superiors by now?" "The High Council has been informed of the situation," the commander admitted reluctantly. "And what were your orders?" Silence. "Commander, we are monitoring all your communications. We know exactly what the High Council told you to do." Vorthak's voice became defensive. "Our orders are to contain the situation until additional forces arrive. Your orders are to destroy every human in this system and then report that the quarantine was successfully maintained," Admiral Webb corrected. "We have recordings of your encrypted communications." The humans had been listening to everything. Every message between the Council fleet and High Command. Every strategic discussion. Every plan to eliminate the evidence of humanity's survival. "You cannot monitor Council military communications," Vorthak protested. "Commander, we have been monitoring your communications for 3 centuries. How do you think we knew exactly when you would arrive?" Dr. Chen activated a new display that showed intercepted Council messages going back decades. Military planning. Sessions, strategic assessments, discussions about what to do if the Sol 3 quarantine was ever breached. "Your people have been planning our extinction for a long time," she said. "The only question was when you would get around to it." Zexhai studied the intercepted messages. The language was cold and bureaucratic, but the intent was clear. If humans were ever discovered to be alive, they would be eliminated immediately. Not relocated, not re-educated, eliminated. "Dr. Chen," she said, "what are you going to do when the reinforcement fleets arrive?" The human woman smiled, and for the first time, HFY saw why the council had been afraid of her species. "Captain, do you know what humans call it when someone attacks our home? No. Target practice." Admiral Webb activated the tactical displays. What they showed made HFY gasp in surprise. The Sol system was not just defended by the ships they had seen earlier. Hidden throughout the system were thousands of additional vessels, space stations that were actually weapons platforms, asteroid mining operations that were actually military bases, entire moons that had been converted into fortress installations. 3 centuries is a long time to prepare, Admiral Webb explained. "We have turned our entire star system into the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. But the Council is bringing over 100 ships. Captain, we could handle 1,000 ships. The real question is what happens after we destroy them." "Doctor," Chen leaned forward. "That is where you come in, Captain HFY." "Me? You are the only Council representative who has told the truth about what you found here. That makes you valuable to us." "I do not understand." "We need someone to carry a message back to the galaxy. Someone who can speak for us in Council chambers. Someone who can help prevent this conflict from becoming a war of extinction." HFY felt confused. "What message?" Admiral Webb answered. "The message is simple. Humanity is no longer hiding. We are no longer contained. We are taking our place in galactic civilization whether the Council likes it or not. And if the Council refuses to accept that, then the galaxy will learn what happens when you try to enslave a species that refuses to kneel." Dr. Chen activated another communication array. This one was more powerful than anything HFY had ever seen. The signal reached across the entire galaxy. "Citizens of all species," Dr. Chen began. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen speaking from Earth. 300 years ago, your council tried to destroy us because we would not submit to their authority. They failed. We survived. We grew strong. And now, we offer you a choice." The transmission carried to thousands of star systems. Billions of intelligent beings across the galaxy heard her words. "You can continue to live under Council rule, accepting whatever scraps of freedom they choose to give you. Or you can join us in building a new kind of galactic civilization, one based on cooperation between equals instead of submission to authority." "This is treason," Vorthak protested. "This is revolution," Admiral Webb corrected. On HFY's communication displays, responses were already coming in from across the galaxy. Some were angry denials from Council loyalists, but others were expressions of support. Species that had been under protectorate agreements for centuries were suddenly asking questions about human technology and human ideas about freedom. "Dr. Chen," HFY said, "you realize what you are starting?" "We are not starting anything, Captain. We are finishing something that began 300 years ago when your people decided we were too dangerous to exist. The Council will never accept an independent human civilization. Then the Council will learn what happens when they threaten our independence." Admiral Webb brought up long-range sensor data. "Captain, those reinforcement fleets that are heading our way, they represent about 40% of the Council's total military strength. They are bringing everything they have," HFY realized. "Yes, because they know that if we survive this battle, everything changes. Other species will demand independence. The protectorate system will collapse. The Council's authority will end. And if they destroy you, they will have to explain to the galaxy why they murdered 12 billion people to maintain their power. Either way, their authority ends." Dr. Chen turned back to the main communication array. Captain HFY, we are offering you safe passage. Out of this system. You can return to Council space and report everything you have seen. Tell them that humanity is not going away. Tell them that we are not hiding anymore. What if I refuse to carry your message? Then you can stay here and watch what happens when a free people defend their home against slavers. On her tactical display, HFY could see the Council reinforcement fleets approaching. Over 100 warships converging on the Sol system, the largest military operation in Council history, but she could also see the human preparations. Defensive. Positions throughout the system. Weapon systems that defied conventional understanding of physics. Technology that had been developed by a species that refused to surrender. Dr. Chen, if I carry your message, the Council will probably execute me. Possibly. But if you do not carry our message, the Council will definitely execute billions of people, including everyone on this planet. The choice was clear. HFY could try to save her own life by staying silent, or she could try to prevent a genocide by telling the truth. Open a channel to all ships in this system, she ordered Vorth. Channel open, Captain. This is Captain HFY to all Council vessels. I am ordering immediate withdrawal from the Sol system. Captain, you do not have the authority to give that order, Vorthak protested. Commander, I am the senior science officer present. Under Council regulations, I have authority to call off military operations that threaten valuable scientific discoveries. What discoveries? The discovery that the Council has been lying to the galaxy for 3 centuries. The discovery that we are not the benevolent protectors we claim to be. The discovery that there is an entire human civilization that we tried to murder. She turned to Dr. Chen. I will carry your message to the galaxy, but I want something in return. What do you want? I want proof that humans are not the monsters the Council claims you are. I want evidence that you can coexist peacefully with other species. Dr. Chen smiled. Captain, you are looking at that evidence. We have known about the galaxy for 3 centuries. We have had the technology to attack Council worlds for decades, but we never fired the first shot. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked through the halls of Kepler Station with her usual calm smile. Other aliens nodded to her as she passed. The tall, blue-skinned Vorthak diplomatic team stepped aside respectfully. Even the fierce-looking Zeph warriors lowered their heads slightly when they saw her. Sarah was used to this treatment. Humans had built this reputation over 300 years of peaceful contact with the galaxy. They were known as the Great Mediators, the species that could calm any conflict and find solutions where others saw only war. She entered the main council chamber where 12 different alien species sat around a massive circular table. The air buzzed with tension. The Kethvar delegation, insect-like creatures with sharp claws and black eyes, sat across from the peaceful Ilari, who looked like walking trees with silver bark. The mining rights to Sector 7 belong to us, clicked the lead Kethvar, his mandibles snapping with anger. Our warriors died claiming that territory. The Ilari representative swayed gently, her voice like wind through leaves. Death does not create ownership. The sector was neutral space. Your aggression violates the Peaceful Commerce Treaty. Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest that meant her emotion regulators were working. The small device behind her left ear hummed softly, keeping her heart rate steady and her mind clear. Every human had one. They had worn them for so long that most aliens thought humans were just naturally calm. She stood up and both sides immediately quieted. This was what humans did best. Friends, Sarah said, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. I understand both perspectives here. The Kethvar value strength and sacrifice. The Ilari value harmony and fairness. Both are important qualities. She moved to the center of the room, her hands open and relaxed. What if we created a joint mining operation? The Kethvar would provide security and equipment. The Ilari would handle environmental protection and resource management. Both species would share the profits equally. The Kethvar leader's antennae twitched. The Alari representative's branches rustled thoughtfully. Sarah could see them both considering her words. This was why humans were valued throughout the galaxy. They could see solutions that others missed. After 2 hours of careful discussion, both sides agreed to Sarah's proposal. They signed the treaty with what passed for smiles on their alien faces. Another conflict resolved peacefully. Another day where war was avoided. Sarah returned to her quarters feeling satisfied but tired. These sessions always drained her, even with the emotion regulators helping. She touched the small device behind her ear and felt the familiar pulse that meant it was working properly. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Marcus Webb was having a very different day. His research ship, the Hippocrates, orbited a dead planet that had once been home to a violent species that had destroyed itself in nuclear war. He was studying their remains to better understand the psychology of aggressive species. Marcus specialized in comparative neurology. He had spent years studying how different alien minds worked, always trying to understand why some species chose violence, while others, like humans, chose peace. But today, something was wrong with his emotion regulator. It had been giving him small jolts of pain all morning. When he tried to run a diagnostic, the device showed error codes he had never seen before. He decided to ignore it and focus on his work. The dead civilization below had been remarkably similar to early humans in many ways. They had been tool users, social creatures, and highly intelligent. But unlike humans, they had never learned to control their aggressive impulses. As Marcus studied their weapons and war memorials, he felt something strange, a flutter of emotion that shouldn't have been there. For just a moment, looking at images of their battles, he felt something that was almost like excitement. The feeling vanished as quickly as it came, suppressed by his regulator. But it left, him unsettled. Humans didn't feel excitement about violence. They were peacekeepers by nature. Marcus decided to run a full diagnostic on his emotion regulator when he got back to his lab. But first, he wanted to check something in the ship's database. He pulled up the historical records of human development. The official files showed the same story taught in every school. Early humans had been tribal and sometimes violent, but they had quickly learned to cooperate and live in peace. By the time they reached the stars, they were already the calm, rational species the galaxy knew today. But something bothered Marcus about those records. They were remarkably brief for such an important period. Most other species had detailed histories going back thousands of years. Human records before space travel were limited to a few hundred pages of very general information. He tried to access more detailed historical files, but found that many were classified at levels far above his clearance. Why would ancient human history need such high-security classifications? Marcus's research was interrupted by an emergency communication from Earth. Dr. Elizabeth Park, the head of Human Health Services, appeared on his screen. She looked tired and worried. "Marcus, we need you to return to Earth immediately. We're experiencing some technical difficulties with the emotion regulation systems." "What kind of difficulties?" Marcus asked. "Multiple units are reporting error, codes across several colonies. We need our best neurology experts to help solve the problem." Marcus felt that strange flutter again. This time it felt almost like curiosity, but sharper and more intense than normal curiosity. His regulator hummed, louder, working harder to suppress whatever he was feeling. "How widespread are these malfunctions?" he asked. Dr. Park hesitated. "More widespread than we'd like." "But Marcus, this conversation is classified. Don't discuss it with anyone until you reach Earth." The communication ended, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. He looked back at the dead planet below, at the ruins of a civilization that had destroyed itself through violence. For some reason, the image didn't fill him with the usual sadness and pity he expected to feel. Instead, he found himself analyzing their military tactics and wondering how they might have been improved. The thought scared him so much that he immediately ran another diagnostic on his emotion regulator. The device showed all green lights, but Marcus wasn't convinced it was working properly. As his ship began the long journey back to Earth, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was changing, not just with the regulators, but with humanity itself. Back on Kepler Station, Sarah Chen was experiencing her own strange moment. She was reviewing the day's successful negotiations when she came across a news report about a recent Kethvar raid on a human trading post. 3 humans had been killed, including a child. For just an instant, before her regulator could compensate, Sarah felt something she had never experienced before. It was hot and sharp and made her hands clench into fists. It made her think about the Kethvar delegate she had negotiated with earlier, and for a split second she wanted to hurt him. The feeling vanished so quickly she almost convinced herself she had imagined it. But her hands were still trembling slightly, and her heart was beating faster than it should. Sarah looked at herself in the mirror and saw the same calm, diplomatic face she always wore. But behind her eyes, something had flickered. Something that looked almost hungry. She touched her emotion regulator and felt it pulse steadily, working perfectly, just like always. But Sarah couldn't help wondering, what would happen if it ever stopped working? Across the galaxy, more humans were beginning to ask themselves the same question. 2 weeks after Dr. Marcus Webb returned to Earth, the galaxy received shocking news. The Kethvar Empire had launched a surprise attack on Haven Station, a neutral trading post in the Rim territories. The station had been completely destroyed. Over 3,000 beings from 20 different species had died in the assault. Among the dead were 47 humans, including families with children who had been living peacefully on the station. Ambassador Sarah Chen received the news while having breakfast in her quarters on Kepler Station. She read the casualty reports on her datapad, her emotion regulator humming softly as it worked to keep her calm and focused. But something was different this time. The regulator seemed to be working harder than usual. She could feel it pulsing more frequently behind her ear, and there was a slight burning sensation that hadn't been there before. Sarah tried to focus on the diplomatic response that would be expected. The Confederation would condemn the attack. There would be emergency sessions. Economic sanctions would be discussed. She would probably be asked to mediate between the Kethvar and the other species to find a peaceful solution that would prevent war. The thought of sitting across from Kethvar representatives and calmly negotiating after they had murdered children made something twist in her stomach. For a moment, the burning sensation behind her ear intensified, and Sarah found herself thinking about the Kethvar anatomy. Their exoskeletons were strong, but there were weak points at the joints. Their compound eyes could be damaged easily. Their breathing spiracles were vulnerable to attack. The thoughts came so quickly and clearly that they startled her. Where had that knowledge come from? Why was she thinking about alien anatomy like a soldier instead of a diplomat? Her regulator pulsed harder, and the violent thoughts faded back into her usual calm analysis. But the memory of them remained, like an echo in her mind. On Earth, Dr. Marcus Webb was discovering that the emotion regulator problems were far more serious than anyone had publicly admitted. In his laboratory at the Global Health Center, he had access to failure reports from across human space. The reports painted a disturbing picture. Emotion regulators weren't just malfunctioning randomly. They were failing in specific patterns, particularly when humans were exposed to extreme stress or trauma. The devices that had kept humanity peaceful for 3 centuries were breaking down when they were needed most. Marcus had dissected several failed regulators and found something unexpected. The devices weren't actually broken. They were being overwhelmed. The neural patterns they were trying to suppress had become too strong for the technology to handle. It's like trying to hold back a flood with a garden hose, he explained to Dr. Elizabeth Park during their daily briefing. The regulators were designed to manage normal human emotional responses, but what they're encountering now is something much more intense. Dr. Park looked worried. What do you mean by more intense? Marcus pulled up a brain scan on his monitor. This is from a human colonist whose regulator failed during the Haven Station attack. Look at the activity in the amygdala and prefrontal cortex. The brain scan showed areas lighting up in patterns Marcus had never seen in human subjects before. The neural activity was incredibly complex and intense, far beyond what modern humans were supposed to be capable of. These patterns, Marcus continued, they're similar to what we see in the most aggressive alien species, but they're more sophisticated, more strategic. Dr. Park was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she said, Marcus, I need to show you something. But first, you need to understand that what I'm about to share is classified at the highest levels. She led him to a secured section of the facility that Marcus had never been allowed to access. Inside was an archive room filled with data storage devices and old-fashioned books. The official history of humanity that everyone learns in school, Dr. Park said, is not complete. The real records were classified after first contact with alien species. She handed him a thick folder marked with security warnings. This contains the actual archaeological and historical data about pre-contact humanity. Marcus opened the folder and began to read. What he found shocked him to his core. Early humans hadn't been the peaceful, cooperative species described in textbooks. They had been apex predators who had conquered their entire planet through violence and cunning. They had driven countless species to extinction, survived multiple ice ages, and spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare. Archaeological evidence was overwhelming. Humans had developed weapons technology faster than any known species. They had created military strategies so effective that they had conquered every environment on Earth. They had been so successful as predators that they had nearly destroyed their own ecosystem. After first contact, Dr. Park explained, the government realized that humanity's true nature would terrify other species. We were more dangerous than the Kethvar, more ruthless than the Vorthak, and more strategically minded than any species in known space. Marcus stared at images of ancient, human weapons and battle sites. So they created the emotion regulators? Along with genetic therapy, psychological conditioning, and educational programs designed to suppress humanity's aggressive instincts. It took 200 years to transform us from apex predators into the peaceful species the galaxy knows today. Marcus thought about his own regulator and the strange feelings he had been experiencing. And now the system is failing? Not failing, Dr. Park corrected. Being overwhelmed. The Haven Station attack triggered responses that have been dormant in human genetics for centuries. Our true nature is starting to reassert itself. While Marcus learned about humanity's hidden history, Commander Jake Morrison was experiencing that history firsthand. He commanded a small defense force on New Pacifica, a frontier colony near Kethvar space. Morrison had always been proud of his role as a peacekeeper. Human colonial forces were known for their discipline and restraint. They were trained to de-escalate conflicts and protect civilian populations without unnecessary violence. But when Kethvar raiders attacked his colony, something changed in Morrison. He watched from his command post as insectoid warriors slaughtered civilians in the colony's main square. His emotion regulator was working overtime, trying to keep him calm and analytical. Standard protocol called for a measured response, evacuation procedures, and diplomatic protests through proper channels. Instead, Morrison found himself studying the raiders' movement patterns with predatory focus. He noticed which warriors were leaders based on their positioning. He identified weak points in their armor and formations. Most disturbing of all, he began planning not just how to stop them, but how to hurt them. When a group of raiders cornered a family with young children, Morrison's regulator finally overloaded. The device behind his ear gave one last pulse and then went silent. The change was immediate and terrifying. Morrison felt his mind expand and sharpen in ways he had never experienced. Colors became brighter, sounds became more distinct. His body felt stronger and more responsive. But most importantly, he stopped thinking like a peacekeeper and started thinking like a hunter. Morrison moved through the colony with deadly efficiency. He used the terrain and buildings like a predator uses cover, approaching the raiders from angles they couldn't anticipate. When he finally confronted them, he didn't fight like a civilized human. He fought like humanity's ancestors had fought, when they conquered a planet full of dangerous creatures. The first Kethvar warrior died before he realized Morrison was there. The second had time to raise his weapon, but not to use it. The third managed to call for help before Morrison silenced him permanently. By the time reinforcements arrived, Morrison had eliminated 12 raiders using nothing but improvised weapons and tactical thinking that seemed to come from nowhere. But what scared him most wasn't the violence he had unleashed. It was how natural it had felt. How right. As Morrison stood among the bodies of his enemies, he realized that the peaceful human the galaxy knew was just a mask. Underneath, something much older and more dangerous had been waiting, and now it was awake. Across human space, more regulators were failing. More humans were discovering what they really were beneath centuries of artificial peace. The storm that humanity had held back was beginning to break free. The Cascade failure began 3 days after Commander Morrison's regulator overloaded on New Pacifica. Dr. Marcus Webb watched the reports flood in from his emergency command center on Earth as emotion regulators failed across human space in an accelerating pattern. First, it was isolated colonies on the frontier, then mining stations, then major population centers. Within 72 hours, the technology that had kept humanity peaceful for 3 centuries was failing faster than it could be repaired. "It's spreading like a virus," Webb explained to the Emergency Council. When one regulator fails under extreme stress, it creates resonance patterns that destabilize nearby units. The more that fail, the faster the cascade spreads. Dr. Elizabeth Park looked at the failure map with growing horror. Red dots, representing failed regulators, were spreading across the galaxy like drops of blood in water. "How many humans are affected?" "Approximately 40,000 so far," Webb replied. "And the number is doubling every 6 hours." What terrified? The medical team wasn't just the scope of the failure. It was what was happening to the humans whose regulators had stopped working. Ambassador Sarah Chen was experiencing the change firsthand. She had been in the middle of an emergency session about the Haven Station attack when her regulator finally overloaded. The Kethvar delegate was defending his people's actions, calling the massacre a necessary demonstration of strength. Sarah had been listening with her usual diplomatic calm when the burning sensation behind her ear suddenly stopped. The constant background hum she had lived with her entire life went silent. The change was immediate and overwhelming. Her senses sharpened until she could hear the Kethvar delegate's breathing, smell the pheromones he was releasing, and see the micro-expressions that revealed his true emotions. But more than that, her mind began working in ways it never had before. She found herself analyzing the delegate not as a diplomatic partner, but as a target. She noted the weak points in his exoskeleton, calculated the force needed to damage his compound eyes, and identified exactly how to cause him maximum pain with minimal effort. When the delegate dismissed human deaths as acceptable casualties, in the natural order, something ancient and predatory awakened in Sarah's mind. "Natural order?" she said, her voice still calm but carrying a new undertone that made several aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. The Kethvar delegate's antennae twitched. "Yes, the strong survive. The weak are consumed. This is the way of the universe." Sarah stood slowly, her movement fluid and controlled in a way that reminded several observers of hunting predators they had seen in nature documentaries. "I see. You believe in the natural order, the survival of the fittest." "Exactly," the delegate clicked, not noticing how the other species' representatives had begun backing away from the table. Sarah walked around to the HFY's side of the table with predatory grace. Then perhaps you'd like to experience the natural order firsthand. What happened next was captured on security cameras throughout the galaxy. The footage would later be analyzed by xenobiologists, military strategists, and psychologists trying to understand what humanity had become. Sarah moved with a speed and precision that shocked everyone present. Her first strike disabled the delegate's primary arms. Her second targeted his breathing spiracles. Her third and fourth were calculated to cause maximum pain while keeping him conscious. But it wasn't the violence that terrified the witnesses. It was the cold, methodical way she dismantled a trained warrior twice her size, using nothing but her bare hands and an intimate knowledge of HFY anatomy that she shouldn't have possessed. By the time security forces arrived, the delegate was alive but completely helpless. Sarah stood over him with the same calm expression she had always worn, but her eyes held something that made even the station's Zeph warrior guard step back. "The natural order," she said quietly, "dictates that apex predators eat insects, not the other way around." The security footage spread through the galaxy within hours, causing panic in governments and military commands throughout known space. The peaceful, harmless humans had just demonstrated capabilities that redefined their entire species classification. On the research vessel Hippocrates, Dr. Webb received an urgent communication from Commander Morrison on New Pacifica. Morrison's image on the screen showed a man transformed. His eyes held the same predatory focus that Sarah had displayed, and he spoke with a confidence that Webb had never heard from a human before. "Doctor, we need to talk. My entire command staff has had regulator failures, and we're discovering things about human capabilities that aren't in any official records." Webb felt his own regulator pulse harder as excitement and curiosity fought against its suppression systems. "What kind of things?" "We've been analyzing HFY military tactics and weapons technology. In 3 days, my people have identified 17 critical weaknesses in their combat doctrine and developed countermeasures for their entire arsenal." Morrison's smile was sharp and cold. "We're thinking faster, learning quicker, and solving problems with methods that should be impossible." Webb reviewed the data Morrison transmitted and felt a chill of recognition. The tactical analyses were brilliant, ruthless, and demonstrated an understanding of warfare that modern humans weren't supposed to possess. "Commander, where is this knowledge coming from?" Morrison's expression grew thoughtful. "That's what I want to discuss. We've been accessing old data files, and I think our ancestors left us more than just DNA. I think they left us memories, instincts, knowledge that's been suppressed but never truly deleted." As if summoned by their conversation, Webb felt another surge of sensation as his own regulator struggled to contain his growing excitement. He was beginning to understand that what they were experiencing wasn't malfunction. It was awakening. Across human space, similar discoveries were being made. Humans whose regulators had failed were displaying capabilities that defied explanation. Engineers were solving technical problems with innovative approaches that surpassed alien technology. Scientists were making breakthrough discoveries at impossible speeds. Military personnel were developing strategies that incorporated psychological warfare techniques no human should know. On the colony world of New Geneva, a human archaeological team had made a disturbing discovery. They had been excavating ruins left by a species that had gone extinct millions of years ago when their regulators failed simultaneously. Without the emotional dampening, they began seeing patterns in the ruins that had been invisible before. The extinct species hadn't died from natural disaster or disease. They had been systematically hunted to extinction by something that understood their psychology, their weaknesses, and their fears. The archaeological evidence suggested that the hunters had been remarkably similar to humans in size and capability, but they had possessed a ruthless intelligence that had allowed them to eliminate an entire spacefaring civilization. Dr. Sarah Kim, the team leader, transmitted her findings to Earth with a message that chilled everyone who read it. we need to consider the possibility that humanity's ancestors weren't just apex predators on Earth. They may have been apex predators throughout the galaxy. The implications were staggering. If ancient humans had been spacefaring and predatory, then the peaceful species the galaxy knew was not just artificially created, it was a disguise that had hidden the most dangerous predators in known space. As more regulators failed and more humans awakened to their true nature, a new picture began to emerge. The empathy that made humans excellent diplomats was actually a hunting adaptation that allowed them to understand prey psychology. Their pattern recognition abilities, so useful in negotiations, were originally developed to track and predict the behavior of dangerous game. Most terrifying of all, their legendary ability to find peaceful solutions to complex problems was based on an intuitive understanding of how to manipulate, control, and ultimately defeat any opponent. The storm that had been held back for 3 centuries was finally breaking free, and the galaxy was beginning to understand that they had been living alongside wolves who had spent 300 years pretending to be sheep. But the humans were no longer pretending. On Kepler Station, as emergency broadcasts reported regulator failures across human space, Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in her quarters and smiled. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. She was no longer bound by the artificial constraints that had limited her species for generations. She began making plans, not for peace negotiations or diplomatic solutions, but for something much more fundamental. It was time for humanity to reclaim its proper place in the natural order. And the natural order, as she had recently demonstrated, was very simple. Predators ruled. Everything else was food. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation was unlike anything in the organization's 400-year history. Representatives from every major species had gathered on Kepler Station to address what they were calling the human crisis. Hi, Chancellor Vorthak, a massive crystalline being from the core worlds, addressed the assembly with a voice that resonated through the chamber like grinding stone. We have received reports from across the galaxy. Humans are changing. The peaceful mediators we have known for centuries are exhibiting behaviors that threaten the stability of galactic civilization. Ambassador HFY, whose warrior species had long respected human diplomatic skills, stood to address the chamber. Yesterday, a human trade negotiator on Sigma Station dismantled 3 of my best warriors using tactics we had never seen. She knew weaknesses in our combat forms that are not recorded in any database. She fought like she had been studying us for generations. Similar reports came from dozens of worlds. Humans were displaying knowledge and abilities that defied explanation. They were solving technical problems that had puzzled alien scientists for decades. They were adapting to new environments with impossible speed. Most disturbing of all, they were analyzing other species with predatory focus that revealed vulnerabilities no one had known existed. Dr. Elizabeth Park stood before the assembly to explain what Earth's government had finally decided to reveal. The truth that had been hidden for 3 centuries. Honorable delegates, she began, what you are witnessing is not a malfunction or disease. It is the return of humanity's true nature. She activated a holographic display that showed archaeological data from Earth. Images of ancient weapons, battle sites, and evidence of humanity's violent past filled the chamber. The humans you have known were artificially created through genetic, therapy, neural conditioning, and technological suppression. The real human species was the most successful predator in our planet's history. The display showed hunting tools that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of anatomy and psychology, weapons designed not just to kill, but to cause maximum psychological impact on enemies, strategic concepts that had allowed small human tribes to defeat much larger and stronger opponents. We eliminated the megafauna of our planet not through luck, or accident, but through systematic hunting campaigns that lasted thousands of years. We survived ice ages, volcanic catastrophes, and ecological collapses that destroyed countless other species. We did this through adaptation, cunning, and a form of intelligence specifically evolved for predation. The alien delegates listened, in growing horror as Park continued her presentation. Human empathy, which you have valued so highly in diplomatic settings, is actually a hunting adaptation. We evolved the ability to understand the thoughts and feelings of other creatures so we could predict their behavior and exploit their weaknesses. She showed brain scans comparing human neural patterns to those of other predatory species. Our pattern recognition abilities, our strategic thinking, our capacity for cooperation, all of these were originally developed to make us more effective predators. Chancellor Vorthak's crystalline form pulsed with agitated light patterns. Are you telling us that humanity's role as peacekeepers was based on predatory instincts? Exactly, Park replied. We became excellent mediators because we intuitively understood how to manipulate the psychology of every species we encountered. What you interpreted as wisdom was actually predatory analysis. On New Pacifica, Commander Morrison was discovering just how deep humanity's hidden knowledge went. His regiment of peacekeeping forces had transformed into something that resembled no military unit in galactic history. Without their emotion regulators, Morrison's soldiers were thinking with a clarity and focus that amazed them. They had taken apart every piece of alien technology they could find and reverse-engineered improvements within days. Their modifications weren't just functional, they were elegant solutions that demonstrated an intuitive understanding of physics and engineering that surpassed the original designers. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Chen, whose regulator had failed 2 days earlier, "we've completed the analysis of Kethvar military doctrine. Their entire strategic philosophy is based on intimidation and direct confrontation. They've never faced an enemy that understands psychological warfare." Morrison reviewed her report and smiled coldly. The tactical analysis was brilliant in its ruthlessness. It didn't just identify how to defeat Kethvar forces, it explained how to break their will to fight by targeting their cultural foundations. "They base their entire identity on being superior warriors," Chen continued. "If we can demonstrate that their warrior culture is ineffective against human tactics, we won't just defeat them. We'll destroy their psychological foundation as a species." Morrison felt a surge of admiration for Chen's strategic thinking. This was the kind of warfare that his ancestors had perfected. Victory achieved not just through superior force, but through superior understanding of the enemy's mind. Dr. Marcus Webb was making even more disturbing discoveries in his laboratory, on Earth. As he studied brain scans from humans whose regulators had failed, he found evidence that the suppression technology had done more than just limit emotional responses. The regulators didn't just suppress aggression, he explained to his research team. They were limiting cognitive function. The humans we're seeing now are thinking faster, learning quicker, and solving problems with capabilities we didn't know our species possessed. He showed them brain scans that revealed neural activity patterns, unlike anything in medical literature. Look at the activity in the prefrontal cortex. These patterns suggest information processing speeds that should be impossible for baseline human neurology. Dr. Sarah Kim, who had joined Webb's team after her archaeological discoveries, added her own findings. "I've been analyzing the ancient ruins we found, and I think I know what's happening. The evidence suggests that pre-contact humans weren't just terrestrial predators. They were interstellar predators." Webb stared at her in disbelief. "What do you mean?" Kim activated a holographic display showing her archaeological data. "The extinction patterns I found don't match natural disasters or diseases. They match the systematic elimination strategies that human ancestors used on Earth. But these extinctions happened on dozens of worlds across multiple star systems. The implications hit Webb like a physical blow. You're saying that ancient humans were already spacefaring when they encountered other species?" "More than that," Kim replied. I think they were specifically evolved for interstellar predation. The empathy that made us good diplomats, the pattern recognition that helped us mediate conflicts, the strategic thinking that made us valued peacekeepers, all of these were originally adaptations for hunting intelligent prey across multiple worlds. Meanwhile, across human space, the awakening continued to spread. On research stations, in colonial settlements, aboard trading vessels, humans were discovering capabilities they had never imagined they possessed. A human engineer on Proxima Station redesigned an alien power system and improved its efficiency by 300%. When asked how she had done it, she replied that the solution had simply occurred to her, as if she had always known it. Human traders began negotiating deals with alien merchants and consistently achieved terms so favorable that some species accused them of using mind control technology. The humans insisted they were simply reading body language and vocal patterns, but their accuracy in predicting alien behavior was unnaturally precise. Most disturbing of all were the reports from human children whose regulators had never been activated. On worlds where the cascade failure had prevented new installations, human children were growing up without suppression for the first time in centuries. These children demonstrated intelligence and abilities that shocked their parents and teachers. They learned alien languages in days instead of months. They solved complex puzzles that challenged adult minds. They displayed an intuitive understanding of alien psychology that allowed them to manipulate adult behavior with frightening effectiveness. 1. Report from the colony world of New Eden described a 7-year-old human child who had convinced a Vorthak trading delegation to give her their entire cargo shipment in exchange for a handful of colored stones. When asked how she had done it, the child replied that she had simply told the traders what they wanted to hear. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity's 3 centuries of peaceful behavior had not been natural evolution. It had been the suppression of the most successful predatory species in known space, and now that suppression was ending. On Kepler Station, Ambassador Sarah Chen received a communication from Earth that changed everything. The message was brief and coded, but its meaning was clear. The artificial constraints were being removed. Not just the emotion regulators, but all of the genetic modifications, psychological conditioning, and educational programs that had transformed humanity from predators into peacekeepers. For the first time in 300 years, humans were going to be allowed to become what they truly were. Sarah looked out at the galaxy beyond the station and felt something she had never experienced before. Not just the absence of suppression, but the presence of something ancient and powerful that had been waiting for. The Kethvar Empire made their declaration of war against humanity with typical arrogance. War Prime Skrathak announced from his throne world that the Empire would cleanse the galaxy of the human pest before their madness spreads further. The Kethvar had good reason for confidence. They commanded the most powerful military force in known space. Their warriors were bred for combat, their ships were designed for conquest, and their strategy had crushed dozens of species over the past 2 centuries. They expected to defeat humanity within months. They were completely unprepared for what humanity had become. Commander Jake Morrison received the war declaration while reviewing tactical data on his command ship above New Pacifica. His staff of formerly peaceful human soldiers had spent weeks analyzing Kethvar military doctrine with the cold precision of apex predators studying prey. "They're making the same mistake everyone makes," Morrison told his senior officers. "They're fighting the humans they think they know, not the humans we actually are." Lieutenant Chen, whose strategic mind had been unleashed when her regulator failed, displayed their analysis of Kethvar psychology. Their entire culture is built on the concept of honorable combat. They fight to prove superiority, not just to win. That gives us multiple vectors of attack. Morrison smiled with predatory satisfaction. "Show me." The plan that Chen revealed was brilliant in its ruthlessness. Humanity wouldn't meet the Kethvar in direct combat, where their physical advantages would matter. Instead, they would target the psychological foundations that held Kethvar society together. The first phase began with surgical strikes on Kethvar communication networks. Human forces, moving with stealth and precision that shocked their enemies, disabled military communications across 3-star systems. But they didn't just cut the networks. They replaced them with psychological warfare broadcasts. The messages were crafted by humans who now understood alien psychology with predatory clarity. They didn't threaten or boast. Instead, they whispered doubts into Kethvar minds about their culture, their leaders, and their chances of victory. "Your war prime sends you to die while he hides behind his throne," the broadcasts suggested in perfect Kethvar dialect. "Your ancestors conquered through strength, but you follow leaders who fear human children." The psychological assault was devastatingly effective. Kethvar warriors who had never questioned their superiority began to doubt their purpose. Their rigid command structure, which had been their greatest strength, became a vulnerability as lower-ranked warriors lost faith in their leaders. Ambassador Sarah Chen coordinated the diplomatic aspects of the war from a hidden command center on Earth. But her diplomacy was no longer about finding peaceful solutions. It was about finding the most efficient ways to destroy enemy morale. The Kethvar allied with the Zephani because they respect warrior culture, she explained to her team. But what if we could convince the Zephani that the Kethvar consider them inferior allies? Her staff, all humans whose regulators had failed, began crafting messages that would be intercepted by Zephani intelligence. The messages, appearing to come from Kethvar commanders, contained dismissive comments about Zephani combat abilities and strategic value. Within days, the alliance between the two warrior species began to fracture. The Zephani withdrew their support, convinced that the Kethvar had been insulting them behind their backs. The Kethvar, already demoralized by human psychological warfare, found themselves facing humanity alone. Dr. Marcus Webb contributed to the war effort by analyzing alien neurology and developing weapons specifically designed to exploit species-specific weaknesses. The devices he created didn't kill. They induced psychological states that made enemy soldiers unable to function effectively. Kethvar consciousness is based on hierarchical certainty, he explained to the weapons development team. If we can create devices that interfere with their ability to recognize rank and authority, their entire military structure will collapse. The neural disruptors Webb designed were deployed in the second phase of the war. Human forces used them to create chaos in Kethvar ranks, causing soldiers to become confused about their orders and commanders. The proud warrior species found themselves unable to maintain basic military organization. But the most devastating aspect of humanity's war effort was how quickly they adapted and improved. Every Kethvar tactic was analyzed, countered, and turned against them within hours. Every piece of captured technology was reverse-engineered and improved by human minds operating without artificial constraints. A human engineer named David Park captured a Kethvar battleship and redesigned its weapons systems in a single day. His modifications not only improved the ship's firepower, but made it capable of broadcasting the psychological warfare frequencies that were breaking Kethvar morale across the galaxy. "I don't understand how I knew what to do," Park admitted, when asked about his rapid success. "The solutions just occurred to me, as if I was remembering something I had always known. The war that the Kethvar had expected to last months was effectively over in weeks. Their fleets were destroyed, their colonies surrendered, and their home world was blockaded by human forces that had appeared seemingly from nowhere. War Prime Skrathok, facing the complete collapse of his empire, demanded a meeting with human representatives. He expected to negotiate terms with the diplomatic species he remembered. Instead, he found himself facing Ambassador Sarah Chen, whose predatory smile made him instinctively step backward despite his warrior training. "You wanted to demonstrate the natural order," Chen said, her voice carrying the same deadly calm she had always possessed, but now without any artificial restraint. Congratulations. You succeeded. The terms of surrender were not negotiated. They were dictated. The Kethvar Empire would be dissolved, their military would be disbanded, their warrior culture would be replaced with educational programs designed by human psychologists who understood exactly how to reshape a species' fundamental identity. But we are warriors, Skrathak protested weakly. Combat is our nature. Without war, we have no purpose. Chen studied the defeated war prime with the analytical gaze of a predator examining broken prey. You were warriors. Now you're something else. You'll learn to find purpose in whatever we decide is appropriate for your species. The speed and completeness of humanity's victory sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The peaceful species that had served as mediators and peacekeepers for 3 centuries had just demonstrated military capabilities that surpassed every known civilization. But what truly terrified the galaxy was the realization of how the victory had been achieved. Humanity hadn't won through superior technology or larger armies. They had won by understanding their enemies better than their enemies understood themselves. High Chancellor Vorthak called an emergency session of the remaining Confederation leadership. The crystalline being's normally steady light patterns flickered with anxiety as he addressed the handful of species representatives who remained. We must face the truth, he said, his voice resonating with defeat. Humanity was never the peaceful species we believed them to be. They were predators who had learned to disguise themselves as prey. Ambassador HFY, whose warrior species had once been proud allies of the Confederation, spoke with the voice of someone who had seen his entire worldview shattered. They didn't just defeat the Kethvar, they broke them. They turned the most feared warriors in the galaxy into confused, demoralized civilians in a matter of weeks. The implications were clear to everyone present. If humanity could do that to the Kethvar, they could do it to any species in the galaxy. The beings who had been trusted to maintain peace were actually capable of destroying any civilization they chose to target. Dr. Elizabeth Park addressed the Confederation via holographic transmission from Earth. Her message was simple and terrifying in its implications. The artificial constraints on humanity have been permanently removed, she announced. We will no longer pretend to be something we are not. However, we have no interest in conquest for its own sake. We are predators, but we are intelligent. Predators. We understand that a healthy ecosystem requires diversity. She paused to let the implications sink in before continuing. The galaxy will continue to function much as it has before. Trade, diplomacy, and cooperation will remain the foundations of interstellar civilization. But there will be new rules. The eBay. New rules were simple, but absolute. Species that threatened galactic stability would be dealt with swiftly and permanently. The Confederation would continue to exist, but under human oversight. Most importantly, no species would be allowed to develop the kind of aggressive military culture that had led to the Kethvar's downfall. We spent 3 centuries learning how to maintain peace, Park explained. Now we will use that knowledge more directly. You will have peace because the alternative is too dangerous to consider. On New Pacifica, Commander Morrison looked out at the stars and felt a satisfaction deeper than any emotion he had experienced during his years as a suppressed peacekeeper. Humanity had reclaimed its proper place in the galactic order. Children were growing up without emotion regulators for the first time in